I do want to ask you about test scores, and the way I'm going to ask you this is by telling you what the Washington Policy Center, which is the right of center think tank in the state, said. I know you touted the most recent scores. What they're saying is the data from the November 21 administration of state tests shows 70% of students failed in math, 50% failed in English. This is an education crisis, and the State Board of Education is acting as if it does not exist. The 1.1 million public school students of Washington State deserve better. Give you a chance to respond to that.
I'll start with right of center is a very generous label that you put on the Washington Policy Center. We consider these folks very, very political, and I know they don't consider themselves that, but clearly they step into these spaces. Yeah. They have a privatization ideology. Their mission is to get as many government functions privatized. So I clearly disagree with them. It's also really unhealthy to say kids fail. The benchmark on standardized exams that people typically use is this word proficiency. I don't like that word because when you and I think of proficiency, we generally think, oh, they do pretty good. Proficiency really means designing all the way back to third grade. Are you on track in math to say get to calculus? Are you on track to be in college level writing courses? We get a lot of students there, as you know. We graduate 85% of our students, more than half of them go on to college. We get them there. And for as long as we've had public schools, these numbers would have held up. It's just we've only tested in the last 20 years. So we pick this cut score, and then groups like this get to come along and say, we're failing kids, we should do more vouchers. It's interesting the private schools don't have to do this, number one. And the whole country is in this place. And so how is it that we created one of the most powerful nations in the world, one of the greatest economies in this state? It's because we do a great job in public ed. And if I move that bar low enough, everyone's failing. And if I move that bar high enough, everyone's doing great in school. They're very artificial. It's a 4-3-2-1 scale. What we've said is our students making a year's worth of gains. And then I do like the NAEP assessment, the National Assessment of Educational Progress, as the one where all the states take a common assessment. That's where we saw impacts from COVID, but I can also tell you that we're outperforming most other states. And we get stronger from 4th grade to 8th grade, for example. And we have what's called WA kids, for example. We assess our kids the moment they step into our schools at age 5 to figure out our baseline. Are we moving those students? So I get their objective. Their objective is to sort of vilify public ed for the private choices they want. And there is absolute truth that COVID has had an impact, and the objective scores have gone down across the country and in our state. Everyone has faced this. And it is true that last year we assessed in the fall and again in the spring, and we already saw recovery. So I've never worried about test scores because they don't measure what people think they do. I do use them as an indicator, though. Are things getting a little better, or are we recovering? And so there's some important things to look at in assessment. It is not to shame kids and to put more mental health pressure on them or to have people believe that our schools are failing. They're outstanding.
And do you want to exit from testing? Do you want to move away from this?
I want to get to a test that tells teachers immediately what students need, and this current system we use does not do that. I want tests that tell parents whether or not their child has made a year's worth of gains and whether they're accelerating their learning beyond a year's worth of gains, or if they're struggling and we need to intervene. There's been no value to me to send a score home to a parent and say your kid got a 1, 2, 3, or 4, because they don't know what that means. And we don't do a good job of it. And just because you get a 2, it doesn't mean you're not going to college. And we've learned that 30% of kids who get a 3 or 4, the top scores, don't go to college. So they're college ready in math and English language arts by 10th grade, and a third of them don't step onto a college campus. So these tests aren't doing anything to actually move student learning or to inform teachers, but they're a dipstick. You know, when your tire pressure's low, you should know about that. It doesn't mean you can't drive your car, and it doesn't mean your car isn't awesome, and it doesn't mean it doesn't take you to work, but it's one measure. So no, we're not going to exit testing. The feds require it. It's important that we measure districts and their success. We should never use these things to tell kids that they're not capable of something. That's inappropriate.
And is